So the next sample we're going to do is the 3-step roll hem sample. So it's a way to control this outer edge. You can see we have a little bit of straight grain almost. We have a lot of bias. So we need to control this edge and get a nice tight, small hem finish on this piece. So to do that, we're going to do 3 stages of stitching. And they're all going to be the same line, copying each other, but each one in succession helps us control this. So the very first one, we're going to sew at 1/4 inch all the way around this edge. When we start, we're not going to back stitch. So we're just going to start, and that way we use this stitch to stabilize this outer edge. It's really important that you make this nice and clean, so take your time. Make sure that you get this at a true 1/4 inch. The finished seam allowance is actually 1/2 inch, but we're going to take up the remaining 1/4 through the other steps as we fold this seam, fold the hem. So we're going to go around here, just do our 1/4 inch. Take your time. So we have our 1/4 inch stitching around this outer edge. You can see how the fabric almost wants to curl in just a little bit, which is exactly what we want, because we're going to use that tension in this stitch to help fold this back to do our second stitch. I don't want to clip the threads just yet on the ends. Normally I say clip as soon as you're done, but we want to use that to kind of hold on to this edge so we can get started. So the next step is to fold this back like this. And we're going to, as you can see, we're going to use that tension on that outer edge that stitch provides to help fold that in. Okay, and we're just going to follow the exact same stitch line. Fold it over about 1/8 inch. Okay. And I'm going to just stitch this line. Hopefully you can see that the way that's curling around because of that first stitch. And that's why it's so important that you get that first stitch really nice and clean and smooth and accurate, so that this, the remaining stitches, they follow that and it will be a lot cleaner. All right, so we've got that second stitch done. So you can see how we've got a nice clean edge now. So the final step is to turn this over one more time so that we have a clean finish on the back side as well. However, we want to get rid of this bulk here, so we're going to carefully trim that down before we do that. So we don't want to have all that extra bulk there. And then those little raw edges will be sticking out inside of our garment. So we're going to carefully trim that away. This is a little tricky because you want to make sure you don't actually cut the actual body of the garment. So be very careful. I like to put the blade between the body and where I'm cutting. You can also, if you have an embroidery scissors, those are made for this kind of technique. They look like they have, kind of look like they have a paddle on one side, and they're good for these kinds of applications. All right, so I have that little extra seam allowance there. It's neatly clipped down so that now when I fold this back, we'll get a nice clean finish on the back side. So that's my last step. It's my third stitch, is to fold that back and stitch one more time right over that stitch line that we've been following. And this time I am going to back stitch because this is the final seam that I'm going to sew here. One thing on this, so you can see my fabric, I have these lines in my fabric, so it's making it a little bit trickier to go around this outer corner. So just be aware of that. If you have any kind of details on your fabric, it can change the way this edge wants to curl in. So just take your time. Obviously you picked that fabric for a reason because you wanted it. So just find what, take your time and make it work with that fabric. All right, and here's our finished hem. So you can see how we've just copied that same stitch line all the way through. So we only see one stitch line here, and on our front side we have this nice smooth edge here, a nice curve. And then this needs a final little press to make that really nice and neat, but you get a nice, very tiny little hem for a curved edge.